The galactic battle station Orion's Crown floated like a shining fortress in the black sea of space. It was a massive ring of steel and light, home to thousands of soldiers, engineers, pilots, and officers from more than 20 alien species. Every corridor hummed with energy. Every section was watched by cameras and guarded by armed patrols. And yet, there was one person nobody took seriously: Daniel Cross, the human janitor, while others wore sleek armor or high-tech uniforms. Daniel walked the halls in plain work overalls, carrying a mop and a bucket. His tools were old-fashioned, primitive, as the aliens like to say. No energy sprayers, no nanobot cleaners, just a mop, a brush, and a rag. Out of the way, human. A tall insectoid officer hissed one morning, nearly knocking over his bucket. "Your slow cleaning is a hazard." Daniel just nodded and moved aside. He'd heard it all before. In the mess hall, reptilian engineers laughed at him. "You still scrub floors by hand? You polish rocks, too?" One of them said, slapping his scaled tail on the table. Daniel forced a small smile. It gets the job done. But nobody respected him. They thought humans were weak, slow, and better suited for non-essential work. To most of them, Daniel wasn't even part of the crew. He was just the guy who swept up their mess. Yet Daniel knew Orion's Crown better than almost anyone. He'd cleaned every corner, every hidden duct, every forgotten storage room. He knew where the floors creaked, where the lights flickered, and where the air vents rattled. He knew which cameras didn't quite work and which doors stuck if you pushed them at the right angle. It was just another long shift when things started to feel wrong. Daniel was working alone that night in the lower reactor decks. The place was always quiet, the air filled with a low mechanical hum from the power cores. Thick pipes lined the walls and dim orange lights flickered overhead. It was the kind of place where you could go hours without seeing another soul. He dipped his mop into the bucket and began scrubbing the narrow walkway when he heard it. Click, click, click. He froze. The sound came from somewhere ahead, past the coolant tanks. It wasn't metal tapping. It wasn't machinery. It sounded alive. Daniel tilted his head, listening. Click, click. Then a soft scraping noise. He frowned. The station had translation systems built into the walls. Every known language could be understood instantly by anyone wearing a cum implant. But this sound, this clicking, didn't trigger the translator at all. He leaned his mop against the railing and took a few slow steps forward. The noise stopped. "Hello?" he called out. No answer. A faint shadow shifted behind one of the coolant tanks. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. For a moment he thought it might be an engineer doing late maintenance, but engineers didn't skulk in the dark, and they definitely didn't speak in strange, unregistered languages. He glanced at the nearest wall sensor. Its green light blinked steadily. No life signs detected. That didn't make sense. Daniel wasn't a soldier. But he'd been on the station long enough to know its security systems were top class. If something was here, the sensors should have seen it unless whoever was here didn't want to be seen. He backed away slowly, deciding to report it. The nearest security station wasn't far. Within minutes, he stood before a bored-looking avian guard who was tapping at a holoscreen. "You're telling me you heard?" Clicking, the guard said, not looking up. "Yes," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice calm, and saw movement. Near the coolant tanks? Sensors didn't pick it up. The guard finally looked at him and smirked. Maybe it was the pipes. Or maybe the human janitor's imagination. "I'm telling you, it was someone," Daniel insisted. "Someone who knows how to avoid detection." The guard chuckled and leaned back. "You've been watching too many war holodramas. Go clean something." Daniel clenched his jaw, but said nothing. He knew that arguing would do no good. To them, he was just the janitor, someone who mopped floors, not someone who discovered intruders. That night, as he finished his shift, the strange sounds kept replaying in his head. Click, 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 scrape. He had learned a long time ago that the station's elite thought they were untouchable. But he also knew the truth. Big stations like this were never as secure as people claimed. There were always blind spots, always hidden corners, and if something or someone had gotten inside without being seen, it meant trouble. Serious trouble. Daniel cleaned the last corridor, but his mind wasn't on the work. His eyes kept scanning. The shadows. Every small noise made him tense. Faint flicker in the lights. A soft thump from a ventilation shaft. By the time he clocked out, he was sure of one thing. This wasn't over. Whatever had made that sound was still here, still hiding. And still moving in the dark. Daniel didn't know yet that he had just been the first to notice an enemy no one else believed in. An enemy that, within days, would bring Orion's crown to the edge of destruction. And when that day came, the only person ready to stop it wouldn't be a soldier, a commander, or a hero. It would be the janitor. Daniel Cross walked the corridors of Orion's crown the next day with a mop in one hand and a bucket in the other. Around him, the aliens went about their work, their eyes full of the same mixture of amusement and disdain they always gave him. Some snickered, some didn't even bother to hide their laughter. "Careful, Hillman," a tall, four-armed Zarkith engineer said as Daniel passed. "Don't strain yourself carrying that bucket. Your fragile bones might snap." Daniel smiled, politely but said nothing. He was used to it. The insults slid off him like water, but his mind wasn't on the jokes today. It was on the clicking sounds he'd heard in the lower reactor deck the night before. The noise had been too deliberate, too patterned to be a random machine glitch. He had reported it to station security, but they had laughed him out of the room. "Sounds like you heard the pipes settling," the security chief had said. To cleaning, janitor. Still, Daniel knew what he'd heard as he mopped the floor of the maintenance corridor. He spotted something odd, just a tiny smear of black grease near the wall. That wasn't unusual by itself, except this part of. The station didn't use grease at all. Machines here were all sealed, frictionless magnetic systems. Grease didn't belong here. Daniel crouched down, dipped a cloth in his cleaning solution, and swiped at it. The smell hit him instantly, sharp, metallic, and strange. It didn't smell like any lubricant he'd encountered in his years working. Here, his mind began to race. Could it belong to whatever had made those clicks? He decided to check the lower decks again. When he arrived at the reactor's access tunnel, the lights were dim, as usual. The hum of the reactor core filled the air, steady and calm. But Daniel's ears strained for something else. And there, it was click, 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 pause, click. It was faint, but it was there just like before. It came from somewhere behind the coolant pipes. Daniel's instinct screamed at him to turn around. Ow! But curiosity pushed him forward. He ducked under the pipes. His mop clutched like an awkward spear. Something shifted in the darkness ahead. Not a shadows didn't move on their own. He took a cautious step closer. His boot crunched on something. He looked down. Smolda. A fragment of metal lay on the floor, jagged, blackened, and warm to the touch. Daniel didn't recognize it. But it didn't look like any part of Orion's crown. He quickly stuffed it into his cleaning bag. Then, just as he turned to leave, he heard its footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, and getting closer. Daniel slipped behind a large coolant tank, his heart pounding. Tall, thin silhouette passed through the dim light. Its body was long-limbed, its head low and narrow, with strange ridges across the back. It wasn't wearing a uniform, and it definitely wasn't any species Daniel had seen in the station before. The figure stopped, sniffing the air like it could smell him. Then, slowly, it moved on. Disappearing deeper into the reactor deck, Daniel waited until the sound faded completely before stepping out. He didn't know who or what that thing was. But one thing was certain. Orion's crown had an intruder, and nobody else believed him. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd prove it, even if it meant going where no janitor ever dared to go. Daniel Cross didn't sleep that night. He lay in his small quarters on Orion's crown, staring at the ceiling while the hum of the station's life support systems whispered through the walls. His mind kept replaying the sound of those clicks, and the way that tall, thin creature had stopped, sniffing like it was hunting him. The alien officers would never believe him. They didn't believe him yesterday, and they wouldn't today. So Daniel made a decision if no one else would. Investigate, he would. At dawn, he packed his cleaning cart as usual. But beneath the rags and buckets, hidden in a tool compartment, he placed the jagged metal fragment he'd found in an old, handheld scanner he'd salvaged months ago from the station's scrap pile. It was an outdated model, slow and glitchy. But it still worked well enough to pick up heat signatures. If the intruder was still here, Daniel would find it. The first place he went was the waste processing sector. Few came here except maintenance crews, and even they stayed as little as possible. The place stank of recycled sludge, humming with grinders and processors. Daniel pushed his cart in, pretending to mop the sticky floors while his eyes scanned. The shadows. The scanner in his pocket gave a faint beep. He froze. The screen showed a heat reading small, moving somewhere inside one of the unused waste chutes. Daniel glanced around. No one was watching. He knelt and peered into the chute. It was dark, the kind of dark where your eyes start inventing shapes. But then he saw it, a faint, wet gleam, like an eye catching the light. Before he could react, the gleam vanished deeper into the shaft. Daniel's heart pounded. That thing was moving through the service tunnels. He spent the next few hours moving from deck to deck, scanning whenever no one was looking. Each time, the signal would appear faint, moving and then vanish again. It was like the intruder knew he was hunting it. At one point, while sweeping near the hydroponics bay, Daniel spotted something even stranger. One of the ventilation grates was bent outward from the inside, as if something had pushed through. A few leaves from the bay's plants lay scattered on the floor, along with the same strange black grease he'd found before. He crouched to take a closer look. The smell was identical, sharp, metallic. And then he heard it. Click, click, click. Pause. Click. It was above him this time. Daniel looked up just in time to see a dark shape slip through another vent across the hall. Without thinking, he abandoned his cart and ran. The chase was short. Daniel turned the corner into an empty storage bay and stopped. It was there. The creature stood at the far end of the room, taller than he'd thought, its limbs jointed in strange, insect-like angles. Its head turned slowly toward him, and the ridges along its skull flared slightly, like an animal warning him to back off. They stared at each other for a long, silent moment. Then, with a burst of impossible speed, the thing leapt into the shadows and was gone, leaving only the faint echo of its clicking behind. Daniel stood frozen. He didn't have proof the others would accept. No recordings, no clear images. Just the fragment of metal, the grease, and his own word. But something inside him hardened. If this thing was here, it wasn't sightseeing. It had a purpose, and whatever that purpose was, it wouldn't be good for Orion's crown. Daniel knew what he had to do. He would follow it. He would find out why it was here, before it was too late. The threat revealed Daniel Cross had always been invisible on Orion's crown. Now, it was a shadow moving through the station, his mop replaced with a scanner, and his bucket replaced with a bag full of scraps, clues, and stolen moments of observation. For 2 days, he tracked the creature in secret. It never stayed in one place for long. Sometimes the heat signal appeared in the hydroponics bay, sometimes deep in the engineering ducts, sometimes near the cargo holds where heavy machinery hummed, and alien loaders shouted at each other in their own languages. But this morning, something was different. Daniel followed the signal to a restricted sector reactor chamber 3. Getting inside was dangerous. He didn't have clearance, but janitors learned the station's back routes better than anyone. He slipped in through an old maintenance hatch that no one had bothered to lock in years. The air here was hotter, charged with the hum of raw power. Giant coolant pipes ran along the walls, sweating condensation. The thrum of the reactor core pulsed through his feet. There it was. The intruder crouched near a control panel, its long fingers dancing across the surface gnawed clumsily, but with precision. Daniel realized it wasn't just some mindless predator. It was working. Ducked behind a coolant pump, his heart hammering, and adjusted the scanner to record. The screen flickered, showing faint energy spikes where the creature's hands touched the panel. It was bypassing safety locks. Daniel's mind raced. Reactor Chamber 3 powered half the station. If it was sabotaged, the shields would drop. The weapons would fail, and the station would be left wide open. Out here, in the middle of contested space, that was a death sentence. He leaned out to see better and accidentally kicked a loose wrench. Clang. The creature froze. Slowly, it turned its head. Daniel ducked back, holding his breath. Click, click, click. The sound was closer now. He bolted for the hatch, but before he reached it, a clawed hand slammed into the wall beside him, blocking his way. Ow. Daniel stumbled. Back, staring into the creature's face, pale-ridged, with eyes like cold glass. It studied him for a long moment, and then its mandibles shifted. When it spoke, the voice was deep, guttural, but the translator in Daniel's ear implant caught the words, "You are not security." Daniel swallowed. "No, I'm the janitor." The creature tilted its head. "Then you are." "Oh, nothing." It pushed him aside and vanished into the ducts before he could react. Daniel didn't waste a second. He raced to the nearest security checkpoint and tried to tell them what he'd seen sabotage. Reactor danger, alien infiltrator. They laughed. "Cross, you've been watching too many war dramas," said Lieutenant Vorash, a reptilian officer with scarred scales. "Go back to your mops. Leave the danger to those who can handle it." Daniel stood there, furious. "If you don't believe me, Reactor 3 will be gone in less than a day. And when that happens, don't say I didn't warn you," Vorash waved. "Him away. Get out before I write you up for wasting my time." As Daniel walked away, his jaw tightened. He wasn't going to let this thing destroy Orion's crown knot when no one else would act. If the station's command wouldn't, stop it. He would. But to do that, he'd need more than an old scanner and a mop. He'd need a plan. And he'd need weapons. Daniel Cross had spent years cleaning up other people's messes. Now, for the first time, he was preparing to make one. He returned to his small janitor's storage room, his office, as he liked to call it, locking the door behind him. The shelves were lined with cleaning agents, spare mop heads, old tools, and crates of station supplies. To most, it was useless junk. But to Daniel, it was the perfect starting point for a fight. If the intruder thought he was nothing, it was about to find out what a nothing could do. Step 1. Traps. Daniel dug through the shelves, pulling out coils of insulated wire, spare coolant tubing, and magnetic clamps. In the narrow ducts of Orion's crown, movement was predictable. He could set up snares and trip lines that would either slow the creature down or fry it if the lines were connected to a portable power cell. Step 2. Weapons. The station's security officers wouldn't give him a blaster, so he improvised. He took a long steel broom handle, welded a sharp scrap blade to the end, and reinforced the grip with tape. It's not elegant, but in close quarters, it would work. Step 3. Surveillance. The old handheld scanner was good, but he needed eyes everywhere. He pulled apart a few cleaning drones, rerouted their camera feeds, and programmed them to patrol the tunnels he thought the intruder might use. By the time he was done, the janitor's storage room looked less like a supply closet and more like a war room. Daniel didn't have to wait long. Hours later, the drones picked up movement in one of the lower maintenance tunnels near Reactor Chamber 2. The heat signature was identical to the one he'd seen earlier. He moved fast, slipping into the tunnels before the intruder could vanish. The air was thick with the smell of warm metal and machine oil. Pipes hissed above his head. His traps were in place, thin wires strung low, pressure clamps hidden under loose grates, coolant mist drifting like a ghost in the dim light. The first trap worked perfectly. A sudden crackle echoed through the tunnel, followed by a sharp clicking sound. The creature had stepped on a live wire. It recoiled, its claws sparking from the shock. He lunged from the shadows, jabbing his makeshift spear forward. The blade grazed the alien's arm, leaving a dark smear. The creature shrieked, a sound like grinding. Stonin swung at him with terrifying speed. Daniel ducked, the claws missing his head by inches, and scrambled back, forcing the alien toward the next trap. A coolant pipe hissed to life, spraying freezing vapor into the narrow space. The alien roared, its movements slowing as frost clung to its skin. Daniel's heart pounded. For the first time, he wasn't running away, he was driving it back. But the victory was short-lived. The alien slammed its claws into the wall, ripping through metal like paper, and disappeared into a service hatch. Daniel cursed under his breath. He'd heard it, slowed it, maybe even scared it, but it was still out there. And now it knew he was hunting it. Back in his storage room, Daniel stared at the station map. The creature's pattern was clear. Now it was moving from reactor to reactor, preparing for a massive systems failure. If it reached Reactor 1, the station wouldn't just lose power. The whole core could go critical. Daniel tightened his grip on the spear. He had one chance to stop it. The final showdown was coming. The janitor saves the station. The alarm lights on Orion's crown turned the corridors blood red. Every second counted now. Daniel Cross sprinted through the maintenance tunnels. The map of the station burned into his mind. He knew exactly where the creature was headed, Reactor 1. If it reached the core and damaged the stabilizers, the entire station would rip apart in seconds. The other crew members had finally noticed something was wrong. Over the intercom, the captain's voice barked orders. Security teams converge on Reactor 1. We have an intruder danger level extreme. But Daniel knew they wouldn't make it in time. The creature was too fast, and the only shortcut was through the lower ductus passages, so narrow most aliens couldn't fit. Daniel. Could he slid down a service chute, his boots hitting the deck with a clang. The air was heavy with heat from the reactor chamber ahead. The creature's clicking and growling echoed from the darkness. There it was. It was bigger than he remembered, taller than two men, with long black limbs ending in hooked claws. Its skin shimmered like oily armor, and its many eyes glowed faintly in the dark. It was already at the reactor's control panel, tearing through the protective casing with frightening speed. Sparks rained down. Warning sirens blared. Daniel didn't think he moved. His first strike was with the spear, thrusting hard into the alien's side. The blade slid between plates of armor, and the creature let out a guttural screech. It spun, claws slicing through the air, forcing Daniel to backpedal. The alien lunged. Daniel ducked, feeling the claws scrape the wall above his head, and rammed his shoulder into its chest. The impact knocked them both against the railing overlooking the reactor core, dropped straight into boiling plasma. The heat was unbearable. Sweat stung Daniel's eyes. He had one weapon left, the portable power cell strapped to his belt. If he overloaded it, the explosion would fry anything nearby, including him. He made the choice without hesitation. Grabbing a coolant pipe, he wrenched it open, blasting the alien with freezing vapor. Staggered, giving him the moment he needed. He tore the power cell free, smashed it against the floor to break the safety seal, and shoved it into the alien's chest cavity. The alien's eyes widened. It let out a deafening shriek. Daniel turned and dove for cover. The power cell exploded in a burst of blue light, the shockwave knocking him hard against the floor. Moment there was only ringing in his ears and the faint hum of the reactor. When he lifted his head, the alien was gone, nothing left but scorched armor fragments. Minutes later, security arrived, weapons ready. They found Daniel leaning against the wall, clutching his broken spear, his uniform scorched and torn. The captain stared at him in disbelief. You stopped it? Alone? Daniel shrugged. Just doing my job. Word spread quickly. The harmless human janitor who had been the butt of every joke had saved Orion's crown from destruction. The aliens who once mocked him now avoided meeting his eyes, out of respect, not scorn, and Daniel went back to his cleaning rounds the next day, 'cause even heroes have floors to mop.